The year is 1846, and the land in the Carolina lowlands lies swollen with heat, silence, and something heavier than either. The soil itself is thick with memory, but the kind of memory no family Bible will ever write down. Tonight, I want you to listen carefully, not like a spectator, but like someone about to be initiated into truths men with power swore would never see the surface. If you hear what I'm about to say, you cannot unhear it. That's the price. Beneath the decayed skeleton of Green Hollow Estate, a chamber was carved into the earth, a chamber that was never supposed to breathe again. The owners of that land, men who dined under chandeliers while others broke under the lash, built more than cotton fields. They built a pit. They called it quarters in their ledgers, but those who descended knew it for what it was, a vault of control, a dungeon of flesh. The door was iron, sunk into the ground as though the earth itself conspired to conceal it. No hinges faced outward. It was sealed with chains blackened not by rust alone, but by oil, blood, and time. To open it was not to enter a room, but to trespass against silence itself. And yet, the ground remembers. In the midsummer of that year, 30 souls were marched into the hollow beneath the barn. Men, women, children. They were not recorded as dead. They were not recorded as sold. They simply vanished. The ledgers only noted a correction in inventory, a neat line drawn through names that had breathed hours before. What happened below was never written, but it was heard. In the still nights, when the planters above were long asleep, neighbors swore they caught the sound of counting, voices whispering numbers that stopped at 30, then began again, 30, 30, 30, over and over, like the earth itself was tallying a debt no ledger could contain. You've seen history dressed in marble and polite. See words. What I'm opening for you now is its underbelly, the place where the cries went when no one was listening, the place where a century's silence was purchased with shackles and chains. You are not meant to know this, but you do now, and the descent has only begun. The first step into that chamber is not a step at all. It is a surrender. Imagine the soil pressing close on either side, the stair cut uneven from clay that sweats with moisture even in the driest months. You breathe, but the air feels borrowed, metallic, damp, tinged with something older than human presence. No candle ever lasted long down here. Flames guttered, smoke clung to the ceiling, and the soot remains in constellations of grief. The light above was gone the moment you crossed the threshold, and now the earth itself dictates your sight, your hearing, your pulse. Those who lived in chains above the ground carried stories in their blood, songs older than the plantation, prayers whispered in dialects the owners never understood. Down here, those fragments hardened into ritual, scratches along the walls, not random, not desperate, but patterns repeated with a mathematic obsession. Marks of arcs, crosses, spirals carved deep enough to draw blood from the fingers that made them. Each groove a reminder. Someone had been counting. Someone had been waiting. In the silence between drops of water, you can almost hear it. Breath caught in stone, like the chamber still exhales the memory of its prisoners. And there, at knee height, iron rings mortared into the wall, worn smooth in a single direction as though bodies turned and turned against them until nothing remained but skin and bone. This was not a room. It was a clock, a place designed to measure obedience, to grind time into a punishment more permanent than lashes. Neighbors later claimed they heard cries that never carried words, that the sound of chains did not fade after the war ended. Some spoke of dogs that would not go near the property. Others swore their children came home whispering numbers they had not been taught in school, their lips moving to a rhythm only the ground seemed to know. This is the Ao. Truth you were never given. History isn't buried, it is entombed. And when you walk over land that has fed on screams, you are trespassing on a covenant of silence, a silence kept not for honor, but for fear. fear of what might answer if the counting ever stops. History is not only carved into walls, it bleeds through ink, through careless handwriting, through letters never meant for our eyes. In the courthouse basement, under stacks of dust and silence, a box was found. On its spine, faint pencil letters spelled a name, Green Hollow. Inside, brittle paper, ink browned with age, but still alive. Letters tied in twine, ledgers with corrections, shipping manifests that spoke without ever saying what they meant. One letter, written in August of 1846, is short, frantic, almost trembling. It speaks of unrest among the 30, not 30 men, not 30 workers, just the 30. The writer, Thomas R., notes that his father has taken necessary measures and that the lower chambers are to remain sealed until further notice. No elaboration, no explanation, just the chilling certainty of a door locked behind 30 lives. Another letter, unsigned, colder, addressed to a Charleston merchant. It warns against inquiries, assures shipments will resume, insists the matter of containment is under control. Containment, a word that belongs to prisons, to plagues, not plantations. And yet here it stands, in ink that refuses to fade. The letter closes with instructions, burn after reading, but someone disobeyed. And that disobedience is the only reason you are hearing these words now. The ledger is worse. A list of names, first names only, each one scratched through, a line drawn across the face of a person who once stood in the sun. At the bottom, the number 30, underlined twice, neat, final, like the account had been balanced, not lives extinguished. But what do you do when the numbers refuse to vanish? When they appear again in different columns, in scratched notes, in symbols on iron doors? When the same 30 echo in the walls of an underground chamber? You begin to see the truth. This was not an accident, not a riot, not an isolated cruelty. This was design, a decision, a ritual of control written in ledgers and chains. And now, you are the reader of that ledger. Your eyes have taken in the ink they wanted destroyed. That is how haunting works. It does not stay buried. It waits for someone, anyone, to turn the page. And you have. Night settles differently over Green Hollow. The fields grow still, the cicadas falter, and even the dogs go silent. Those who lived nearby wrote of a peculiar hush that crept across the plantation once the lamps were doused. It was not peace, it was pressure, as if the air itself leaned inward, listening, waiting for something beneath the soil to stir. And then, faint but unmistakable, the counting would begin. 1, 2, 3. The sound was never loud, never shouted. It was breath against the inside of your skull, a whisper that did not belong to the wind. 4, 5, 6. Farmers swore they heard it when walking home after dark, their lantern flames trembling without cause. Mothers pulled children close when little voices recited numbers in the night, lips moving without thought, eyes vacant. Always the same pattern. Always stopping at 30, always beginning again. The superstitious called it a curse. They said the 30 had not died, but had been bound, their spirits sealed into the clay, doomed to march forever in place. The more rational claimed it was imagination, the mind inventing echoes where none existed, but neither reason nor prayer could silence it. Priests were called, salt was scattered, hymns were sung at the edge of the fields. Still, the counting returned. There were stories of those who dared to linger near the chamber door after midnight. They came back changed, skin pale, eyes hollow, voices carrying words they did not understand. One boy repeated a phrase over and over until his tongue bled. "Open the 30, open the 30." His family sent him away, and his name faded from the records. What unnerved the neighbors most was not the voices, but the timing. The counting grew louder, sharper, whenever the soil was disturbed, whenever new hands were brought to work the fields, whenever chains clinked in the night. As though the chamber was Not merely a tomb, but a mirror, reflecting cruelty, amplifying it, marking each injustice with another tally in the earth. And so, generation by generation, silence became law. No one spoke of the underground, no one pried open the rusted door. But silence does not kill memory, it only feeds it. And beneath Green Hollow, the numbers kept rising, whisper by whisper, night after night. When the Civil War bled itself to an end and the Confederacy fell into ash, Green Hollow was abandoned. Its owners fled south, their wealth reduced to dust and debts. For a time, the estate stood empty, its windows gaping like sockets, its halls rotting under rain. But ruins never stay silent for long. In 1872, veterans-turned-scavengers came to strip the house for wood, iron, anything of value. That was when the chamber was rediscovered. The ground gave way under the weight of an ox-drawn cart. The earth collapsed in a groan, swallowing wheel, beast, and driver. When neighbors rushed to pull them free, they found the cracked outline of the buried stair. The door had rusted, but the chains still clung to their sockets like veins running into the soil. The scavengers should have sealed it again, should have left it to the earth. But hunger breeds desperation. They forced the door open. What they found was not simply ruin, it was arrangement. Iron rings still fastened to the walls, scratches still etched into the clay, their edges sharp as if carved hours ago. And in the farthest corner, a pile of what looked like rags. When lifted, the cloth disintegrated, revealing bones bound at the wrists, shackles fused by rust to fragments of human remains. 30. Always 30. The men fled, swearing never to return. Yet not all kept their distance. A handful of amateur historians, emboldened by the new taste for documenting the South's sins, came to record what lay beneath. Their notes, fragments in crumbling journals, describe conditions no human could endure. Airless chambers, scorch marks on the walls, and stones stained darker than mold. But most disturbing were the reports of sound. One entry reads, "The chamber counts. We did not. It did." Another, written shakily, insists that the numbers continued even as they fled the site, following them into the fields. Rumors spread like infection. Freedmen in nearby towns warned their children never to tread near Green Hollow. Old soldiers drank themselves into silence whenever the chamber was mentioned. And by 1880, the estate was once again abandoned, left to rot back into the soil. No one wanted to claim it. No one wanted the burden of owning land that whispered in numbers and bones. But abandonment does not mean peace. The chamber waited. The soil settled. And the 30, they never stopped. By the dawn of the 20th century, America was draped in progress. Railroads stitched the land together, factories breathed smoke into the sky, and men spoke of modernity as though the past had finally been buried. But there are some histories that refuse burial. In 1911, a team of folklorists from Charleston came to Green Hollow, armed with notebooks and Edison cylinders, to capture the songs and stories of the region. They had no intention of digging. They only wanted voices. What they found instead was silence. The locals would not speak of the chamber, not for money, not for posterity. But when pressed, one elderly woman broke. She said her grandmother had been among the 30. She said the numbers had followed her family for generations. Strokes of bad luck, deaths in threes, children who woke screaming at night, reciting numbers they could not yet count. "We carry the tally," she whispered. "It don't let us go." The folklorists dismissed it as superstition, yet when they played back their recordings, faintly beneath the voices, there was counting, distant, rhythmic, mechanical. 30, 30, 30. Word reached the University of South Carolina. A group of archaeologists was dispatched in 1922 under the banner of academic curiosity. They came with shovels, lanterns, and the arrogance of men who believed bones were only artifacts. What they uncovered chilled them. The chamber had partly collapsed, but much remained intact. They catalogued shackles, tools, fragments of pottery. But they did not publish everything. In their private journals, later leaked, they described phenomena no science could explain. Lanterns snuffed out in unison, chalk marks on walls that moved between visits, and always the counting. One man, a skeptic, stayed alone overnight to prove the fears unfounded. He was found the next morning at the stairwell, muttering 30 until his tongue split. He never recovered his speech. The official report was a neutered version, stripped of horror, filed quietly in university archives. The chamber was declared unsafe, sealed again with stone and soil. But even concrete cannot mute the past. Farmers who worked the nearby fields reported their tools breaking in multiples of 30. Trees planted along the boundary withered in neat rows of 30. The number was no longer a memory. It was a wound bleeding into the present. And so, once more, Green Hollow was left to rot. Yet abandonment never erased it. Each generation circled back, drawn like moths to a flame they swore they feared. The chamber waited, always counting, always 30. The Second World War dragged men from every corner of America into foreign battlefields, but it also reached home in ways few recall. In 1943, the U.S. Army requisitioned abandoned lands across the South for training grounds and storage depots. Green Hollow was among them. Bulldozers and surveyors came, armed with maps that reduced centuries of grief into neat black lines. The estate was slated for demolition. Yet when workers broke ground, they uncovered more than rotted beams. The chamber resisted. Chains that should have crumbled after a century still clung to stone. The soil shifted, collapsing machinery into pits that seemed deeper than they had any right to be. Soldiers stationed nearby wrote letters home that hinted at unease. One private described numbers in the wind that followed night patrols. Another wrote that his bunkmates woke screaming, convinced someone was counting in their ears. When one platoon was ordered to clear the chamber entirely, they refused after the first descent. Their sergeant filed a report calling it structurally unsound, but his men whispered of shadows that moved without light, of voices reciting tallies in languages they did not know. Within weeks, the Army abandoned the site. Officially, it was marked hazardous terrain. Unofficially, soldiers spread warnings like wildfire: don't camp near Green Hollow. Don't follow the counting. After the war, developers saw profit where the Army saw danger. In 1954, a company proposed turning the land into a housing tract. They sent surveyors, engineers, men with blueprints and optimism, but every attempt failed. Foundations cracked in multiples of 30. Equipment refused to function. Workers quit after hearing whispers in the soil. By the following year, the project was scrapped. Investors lost fortunes. The land returned to its decay, scarred with half-built frames that never became homes. It was during this time that paranormal investigators arrived, the first wave of what we would now call ghost hunters. Armed with tape recorders and flashbulbs, they descended into the chamber. Their findings never made the newspapers, but fragments survive in self-published pamphlets and private collections. Photographs ruined by streaks of light. Recordings where voices chant numbers with no speaker present. One chilling note scrawled in the margin of a diary: "The 30 are not gone. They are waiting to be opened." By the 1960s, the land was blacklisted in county records. No one would buy it. No one would build on it. But legends do not die. They wait. And Green Hollow waited, pulsing in the dark, its tally never ending. Today, the ruins of Green Hollow do not appear on tourist maps. The estate is nothing more than a scar in the earth, choked with ivy and silence. And yet, those who wander too close say the air grows heavier, as though the soil itself presses against the lungs. Hunters refuse to cross the boundary. Hikers speak of sudden vertigo, of hearing numbers under their breath without meaning to. The chamber remains sealed, but sealed does not mean silent. In 1998, a storm tore through the Carolinas. Floodwaters ripped at the soil, exposing stones that had not seen daylight in a century. Locals reported hearing voices carried on the rushing water, whispers rising louder than the thunder. Emergency crews arrived to find livestock dead in neat rows of 30. The county paved over the ground, declaring it unsafe, but whispers spread online. By the early 2000s, urban explorers began sneaking onto the property, armed with cameras and bravado. Most left with only shaky footage and nerves rattled. A few did not return. Their names are added quietly to the list. Always 30. And now, in the age of endless recording, the legend has become more dangerous. Audio clips circulate in hidden forums, files said to contain the counting. Those who listen report hearing it not only through headphones, but in their homes, in their sleep, in the mouths of their children. Some claim that once you hear the 30, it never leaves you, that the chamber does not want discovery, it wants company. Perhaps you think this is only folklore, a plantation ghost story, a southern Gothic tale meant to chill but not to wound. But remember this, the letters were real, the ledgers were real, the bones, bound in rust, catalogued by archaeologists, were real. And the number 30, scratched into walls, etched into ink, whispered across generations, remains unanswered. If you have listened this far, you are now part of the tally. History does not wait for permission. It reaches forward, gripping anyone willing to hear. And Green Hollow? It still waits beneath the soil, chamber sealed, voices counting, 30, 30, 30. The question is not whether they are still there. The question is this: when the counting reaches you, will you listen, or will you run before the 30 open again?